Hi guys, welcome to my first Q&A, GWR Train 107. And well, I'm not going to spend too long giving an explanation about why it's taken me so long to do a Q&A. I think it's probably just, since the start of the new year, I thought, so, well, try something out, try something different. So this is actually also my first video doing a voiceover as well. So anyway, let's get into it. So the first question comes from R Productions and asks, what made you first started making videos? Well, in fact, I actually started making videos 7 years ago, back in April 2014. Soon, well, this year will be 8 years since I've been on YouTube, and nearly half of that time will be for spotting. I think it's because when I started making videos, at the time, I was only just studying degree back at the time when I first started YouTube itself. It was just an extra, you know. It wasn't anything spectacular. I do admit, you know, it was just an extra at the time. As for Trainspotting, that was I didn't get into that till 2017. I think it was a chance coincidence when I was staying one time in Roydon. I needed a bit more persuasion to do it. Because originally was times when I used to go up to London, I used to do a lot of sound recording, using nothing more than just voice memos on my iPhone at the time, and then I did some photography for a little bit. But I think the turning point was around about May 2017, actually May 7th to be exact, when I went to see the D-Stock farewell. I spent all day up in that Sunday chasing or hunting the D-Stock. Saw it at Bankman. Took a few photos of it, but I didn't film it, obviously, for TFL reasons. So just did some photos of it, and you know, that was where the formations and foundations of my channel started. And as for spotting, well, it wasn't until about 5 weeks later when I was staying in Roydon. At the time, I should have been moved down to Devon at that point, but you know, a couple of things prevented that happening, so that got pushed back to February 2019. But I think staying at Roydon, by chance, was actually Marina Village, which is right next door to the West Anglian Main Line, and Roydon Station. And ironically enough, that was where everything all started. As for the name, that was a bit of a coincidence. The name. It was although my real name is Ross, although nowadays I do get called Roscoe a lot more than my real name. I've actually been called that probably since my college days, and that's how the first formation of my train name started. I've actually been into trains since like I was the age of 4. Like it was back in the days when we still had, you know, the network South East liveries, the intercity liveries, just before privatisation took hold. And as for the 107, that was just kind of random. I will admit it's a random number. That was just one occasion, I think it was a couple of weeks after the D-Stock farewell. I was at Tufnell Park and Northern Line train turns up, Balfour High Barnet, at the top said 107, and I thought, well, I'll just choose that. I would have gone for 007, but the reason I opted not to is because I think that would not have been a very wise move to do so, and like it would have had probably questions to answer from the producers of James Bond why choosing 007, and also it would have been too confusing for viewers probably because I would have confused my channel, which would have been the Trainspotting channel, instead for a James Bond channel. So hopefully that answers your questions. So thank you for that, Noah Productions. Next question comes from Johnny from James and asks, what's your favourite place you've been to for train spotting? This is a difficult one. I've been to a lot of stations, mainly in the south. I wish I could do a lot more up north. Hopefully soon, sometime in the future, I'll be able to do that. If there was one place, my favourite place I've been to for train spotting, I have to say this, and you might be surprised about it, it's actually on the West Coast Main Line, and that would be Chennington. You might wonder why, of all places, Chennington? Well, Chennington, you kind of, okay, it's a station in the middle of nowhere. You've got fields on either side. But even on a day when it's very windy, you just don't know what's going to turn up. You're either going to get a quiet session there, quiet quiet station, nothing really much to shout about. But then you could end up getting jumped out of your skin by about half a dozen trains passing by, and in particular you get quite a lot of freight as well. So yeah, I mean, I do admit it's not the busiest. Okay, it's not the busiest at all, but I have to say there are some constellations about that. So for now, at the moment, although my opinion on it could change, will likely change over time, but at the moment right now, Chainton, I have to say, is one of my favourite stations I've actually been to. So thank you, Joseph James, for that question. Next one comes from Adam P Trainz, and he says, "Hi Russ, what do you prefer? A journey to Waterloo on a 444 or 450, or a journey to Victoria on a 377? That's an interesting one. I have to be honest here. I don't mind travelling on the 450s. I actually like them. The 444s, I haven't actually been on one since 2018. Probably since one time I took a divert route to Southampton Central via Guildford. One time when Weymouth Services were on divert, long story. But I have to say, I prefer. If I was, like I said, I prefer the 450s over the 444s. 444s are okay. They're not brilliant, but they're okay. But as for the journey to Waterloo, I don't really like that at all. I mean, it's just really intimidating at times. I remember coming back from Barnes and back on November 25th after I finished up one evening, and it was busy. And I just didn't feel comfortable at all on a journey to Waterloo. And I just thought I just needed to get off the train. So I got off at Vauxhall. Doesn't mean I don't like Waterloo itself, it's just I just didn't feel comfortable at the time. Just taking the journey to Waterloo. As for the journey to Victoria on a 377, I have to say I would prefer that, although despite, even if it's say either a fast service or a stopping service, I don't mind. I think it's more comfy, it's very quiet. I do admit it could be very slow, but overall at the end of the day, I would probably prefer that over a 444 450. No disrespect though to those two. I don't mind them. But, overall at the end of the day, I would rather prefer a journey to Victoria on a 377 rather than a journey to Waterloo. So thank you, Adam P Trainz, for that question. Next one comes from Jack and Ned, and they ask, what's better, a 165-1 or 158? Or in this case, what's better, 165-1 or the 158? Okay, both of them have their flaws, I do admit. 165-1s, I don't mind them. They're okay, but I think they could do with a bit of an update. Well, actually, good thing at the time of this recording, there is some interior updates going on at the moment. So I think that, would that be better looking for them? I think it should be, but at the end of it all, when it comes to services, I mean, two cars, they're alright, but if you put them on routes, say, Weymouth or Bristol or Cardiff or, I'm trying to think one other, Great Malvern, or even sometimes Basingstoke, and you got it, and it's a busy day, it's just not the right train for the job. It's just not really thought through on that, and the performance can be let down sometimes. But at the end of it all, I'm not a big fan of it. I don't mind it. I'm just not a big fan of it. But I just think the allocations they're working on, if it's the Thames Valley lines, whether it's Greenford, whether it's Marlow, whether it's Windsor, whether it's the Regatta line to Henley on Thames, I don't mind that. But two cars like Basingstoke, or even sometimes Didcot to Oxford, I'm just not too sure. I just think, for me personally, when you go, if it's a busy day, they're not really suitable for those lines at all. I think 3 cars is the way to go for some of those routes. As for the 158s, I just have to favour over them in some ways. Although I do concede, while they're okay if they get like a long distance where it can, when the train is able to stretch its legs, which is without having to constantly stop, start, stop, start, stop, start every single station. That's fine. But when it comes to branch lines, especially like if it's my one, like on the Barnsley line, they're comfy, they're quiet, but you just gotta hope the train sounds healthy. But when they're not sounding healthy, and sometimes they could be really, really loud and rattly, it is a problem. And also, a 3-car set itself, it's alright, it's fine, it's great overall, but I think improvements can be made. The one thing I think they just need to improve on, perhaps long term, is probably trying to get them to deal with the jointage rail you get on some sections on some branch lines, because while they're good on continuous rail, no problem at all for them, but on the jointed rail, like I get on some sections of my local branch line to Barnstable, they for some reason just don't like it. But you know, overall between the two, if I were to prefer one or the other, I would have to say just about I would prefer the 158s. So thank you, Jack and Ed, for that question. The next question comes from let's see what my next one is. Will be, oh, there we go. My next one comes from CSM Trainspotting, and he asks, is this: if you could recommend, it's gonna be CSM Trainspotting. Do apologise if I got the name wrong. It says, if you could recommend one station for everyone to visit at least once, what would it be? That's a tricky one. I have to say, one station I would recommend for everyone to visit at some point, whether you like the surroundings or not, whether it's the type of trains you like or whether you don't like them, I would have to say, of all places, I'd have to say Cardiff Central. Now, I haven't filmed at Cardiff Central since December 2019, but based on my 3 visits there, the first one was just at a time when Great Western was on diverts via Gloucester because of the overhead line work was going on between Bristol Parkway and Seven Tunnel Junction. You also, the second and third visits I did make in 2019, actually my first visit was 2018 to be exact, 2019, when I did my 2 visits there, I really can see there are some ups and downs here. The station appearance at the moment, it's not great, but it doesn't hide the fact when it comes to keeping yourself busy for variety, then it makes up for that. I think, let's say, if you've got on the main line, it's very quiet at times. The valley lines themselves, they'll keep you busy, and you just have to pay attention. So I think if anybody wants, okay, yes, the gantries are a problem, especially since now electrification on Great Western now goes to Cardiff Central. I do think that perhaps maybe going forward something can be improved about that place. There is some talk that the station maybe could be built in some place. The station building, I don't know, but only time will tell whether that will happen. But I do think, despite some of its issues, despite the gantries, I know they're hideous, but if I was to recommend one station, one to go to, just to keep yourself busy, or if, let's say, if you're going to prepare yourself to do something like Clapham Junction, probably you want to start off at Cardiff Central. That's a starting point. So that's what I recommend. So thank you, CSM Trainspotting, for your question on that one. Next one comes from FelixTheFox. He's got 2 questions. He says, Happy New Year. In terms of Q&A, what is your favourite TRC and favourite train overall? That's a difficult one. My favourite TRC. My favourite TRC would have to be, and you might be surprised by this, would have to be Greater Anglia. Now, you're probably wondering, wait a minute. You travel on Great Western Railway quite a lot, so why are you not liking them? I like Great Western Railway. I like the customer service. It's alright. It's not perfect, but it's alright. But the only thing is though, what kind of drops the score from them from top spot is one of my favourites, is the allocations when it comes to the trains themselves. Since Great Western opted to take the gamble with IETs, obviously, as anyone knew what happened back last May when cracks were found on them, I will be probably doing a subject about that at some point. I should do a video about that at some point, excuse me. So the thing is that I think by gambling on one entire intercity fleet, instead of actually doing like Evangelist Coast are going to probably be doing over the next few years when their Voyagers are getting replaced by 805s and 7s by keeping the 390s in, you've got to have flexibility. I think Great Western had a bit more flexibility, so instead of relying on just Hitachi IETs, I think it should have gone for something maybe from Siemens, perhaps maybe from Alstom, maybe something from CAF. You know, like Transport Express have got with the 397s and the 802 Novas. I think if they'd gone with a bit more flexibility, I would have put them as one of my top TOCs. But because they took the gamble by putting IETs, I have to score them down some bad points on that. So that's what drops the score down. Secondly, sometimes the allocation of the services, whether it's sending 2 cars and routes you know probably is not a good idea, like Exeter to Penzance for example. Sometimes you could get a 2 car 150 or 158. That is a problem, and hopefully, I know Great Western, I know sometimes we'll say, well, part of the problem is because sometimes the cars are HSTs might not be as reliable. Okay, yeah, they're over 40 plus years old, but you know, at least probably put 2 sets 2 car 158s or 2 150s together, or perhaps just send a 3 car 158 as a backup if you can't get a cars of HST. I mean, I know it sounds simple and straightforward, but obviously it depends what other services they're probably doing. But as for Greater Angular, yeah, I know some will say, why have I put them as my favourite? I think for me, I mean, I grew up mainly in Essex. Yeah, we had to like Neckwood South East, First Great Eastern. One Railway for me was a hideous name with a livery that was so hideous, that was designed by somebody who didn't know how to watch like episodes of Art Attack. Then you had National Express East Anglia, which didn't really help. Greater Anglia then took over. I have to say they were a disaster to begin with. Did they improve? I think in some ways they did, but I think given what the fleet they had at the time, I think it was too much for them. Once they got rid of the 315, well, not got rid of 315s, since they kind of just gave the 315s over to TfL, I think that enables them to improve their service a bit more. I will admit them gambling on, say, 720, 745, 755s is a big risk, but I think in some ways you kind of sense it was inevitable. They were going to have to do something about that. I know some will say, you missed the Cars 90s. I get it, the Cars 90s, you know, I do miss that loco feel to that service. But you know, change at some point was going to happen. But, you know, at the end of the day, like, given the circumstances, I think at Greater Anglia, I mean, the transition is still a bit slow, but I think given what they've got at the moment, it's more better than they had like 10 years ago. So I think there's still room for improvement. I still think, you know, I think some of the things timetable wise still is a work in progress. I think with the new 720s, once they're fully in service, I can't see it being this summer, but I do think there's still, like I said, still room for improvement. But I think that, I mean, you got to credit them on some things. It's not, the trains are not perfect, but at least Greater Anglia have been open to try and minimise the issues like with the so-called ironboard seating debate. I mean, going for the kill seat instead of the Finzer seating, I think was a very wise decision, and I have to credit them for that, because it takes a lot of balls to actually say, no, we're not putting the Finzer seating in. we're going to do a consultation. And I think that's something that rail companies with newer trains should always do first before you go and design the interior. So I think that's, and you have to credit Greater Anglia for that. Will that make them a good operator long term? There are going to still be teething problems, of course, with modern trains. But, you know, I think we have to accept that. I know the old trains, like the 321s, the 317s, and when they are completely gone for good, yeah, I know, it's going to be a miss. But everyone's going to have to understand here, it's been coming for some time now. And it was good, and we have to accept that. I know some people will not accept that new trains, that I prefer the old trains over new ones. It doesn't matter what operator you prefer. It doesn't matter what company, TOC you run. But you just have to accept it. As for the second question, next question is, what's my favourite train overall? Again, it's a very difficult one. If it was my favourite train overall, this is a hard one. I'm going to base this overall. Obviously, it would have to be an HST. It's I mean, I've been on it a couple of times before. It was withdrawn from Great Western Railway. I remember taking my last one at NER a couple of months before they were withdrawn back in September 2019. Even though it was a crowded HSTs from York back to King's Cross, which was actually doing service from Inverness, and I really liked it. I really liked the HST. I like it as a train. I know, yes, my last HST ride, actually, to be exact, was actually November 2019, which was on a East Midlands service going up to Leicester, and the only exceptions to that would be Castlesay HSTs, but I won't put them down count them as long distance. But do you know what? I'm fine with it. The train style for me was a game changer, but it was back in the 70s, and you know, I can understand why people like them. Do I think modern trains, the modern ones that replace the long distance ones, will replace legacy HST? I don't think that's never going to be surpassed. The HST's legacy will never be surpassed. If anyone's watched my video from Paddington from May 18, 2019, I kind of, in the Premier Chat, I summed it up with, no matter what era takes over, when the IETs took over after the final HST left, I did mention that I think regardless what the IETs do, the HST legacy, and I stick by what I said, the legacy of the HST will probably never be surpassed. And I don't think it ever will be. But, you know, that's my take on it. I prefer the HST because it was the very last high-speed train to have good comfort. I like your slam doors. Side doors I'm not a too big keen fan of, but I just have to put up with it. Yes, you still got that old reminiscent reminder of the days. Hey, these used to be long distance trains like Castle HSTs, like they've got at the moment on GWR. But I do miss that raw power. You know, every time an HST leaves the station, I do miss it. I do still get some on cross country occasionally, but not much. But at the end of the day, you know, I know some other trains out there I probably would prefer, but you know, at the moment, right now, although like I said, it's like with my favourite place for spotting, that could change over time, is my favourite train overall has to be the HST. So thank you, FelixTheFox, for your 2 questions there. My final 2 questions come from Romeo's World of TFL, and he asks, what's your favourite GWR train, and what is your favourite station in the entire of Great Britain? I'm going to go to the second one first. I don't think you should really compare the entire of Great Britain. The only areas I would say, if it was to narrow it down, is the furthest north I've ever been to is both York and Nottingham. If it was to the west, I would probably say Swansea, but that's the furthest I've travelled. and mostly it's been in the south. If I was to say my favourite station entirely, well, for me it has to be York. Now, in some ways you might say, well, does that tie into Jones of James' question about if your favourite place before Trainspotting? York for me is a favourite place, but I just need maybe a couple more times going there just to say, actually, it is a favourite train spot. It's definitely one of my top 3. There's no denying about that. If it was station appearance, I would prefer that just over Paddington, but only just. Paddington, you still got that Great Western feel. Yes, the trains are a lot different now compared to say 10 years ago, and also Paddington back then was kind of in a little bit more of a much dirty state, is probably right. Since they kind of restored the original Brunel structure, I think it's actually made it really stand out. As for York itself, which is the reason why it just beats that, is because, well, why wouldn't it? It is a great place to go to, whether it's your spotting for the day, whether you're going out for the day, whether you're going to the museum itself. You could do all 3 in one go. And, you know, it is a great place to, that's why it is one of my favourite stations. And it is definitely one of my favourite stations probably in Britain. Now, Scotland at the moment doesn't count because I haven't spotted in Scotland. So until I spot in Scotland, whenever that's going to be, I can't really decide that. I can't decide north of York because, again, I have to go up the routes, whether it's north of York, whether it's to Edinburgh, or whether it's to go by West Coast Main Line, say somewhere like Preston or Liverpool Lime Street, or I don't know, Wigan North Western, Carlisle, Lockerbie, Motherwell, etc. Then I can't decide that. I'm only basing this on the stations I filmed at. So my favourite station, based on its appearance, based on its architecture layout, I have to favour York as my favourite station in Great Britain. Now, for my final question to answer is my favourite GWR train. If it was right now, and this is a difficult one, but it was my favourite GWR train, I would be tempted to say the HST, but I would have to say at the moment it has to be, I think I have to say, would have to be the IET. Now, some will probably say, well, hang on a minute, does that contradict your answer you say about your favourite train overall? Okay, there's 2 differences here. If it's the fleet right now, or GWR, it's the IET, but I only put it there just. But there are some things I could see that needs to be improved. The seating itself needs to be improved. The coupling system needs to be make sure it's not contaminated with dirt or dust, so when the train does couple up, at least it works and locks in. I think the trains itself, they pull well as an electric mode. I like them in electric mode, they're fine. But when it comes to diesel mode, it just sounds like it's in a bit of a bad mood. On HST, you wouldn't feel that. You actually barely would hear it. On the IETs you can, but I do admit some things do have to be improved on it. But as a train right now, I do say it is one of my favourite GWR trains. I know some will disagree with that, but that's fine. But I will be doing a video on about the IETs because I know there's still a long way to go for both GWR and Hitachi to win over their critics and those who are very sceptical of them about their trains themselves. There's still a long way to go about that. But the thing is though, I think you've got to remember, these trains have only been around for just over 4 years. And I think, yes, it's never going to surpass the HST legacy. It's not going to live up to the HST legacy. But I would say to people out there, don't judge them just because they're replacing an HST. Judge them as they are. They're not brilliant. They're not perfect. Your seating is debatable. But at the end of the day, that's the era we live in. And I know some people might complain about that, but that's the way it is. That's the era we live in now. But anyway, so that will do for my first Q&A. Thank you guys so much for watching, and also thank you so much for the support. It means a lot, and over 4 years on this channel, and I'm really grateful for that. They've got a couple of other over videos to come. Sometime in the future I will be doing some voiceover on train sim. Won't be for series 2 at the moment because I'm going to finish that up over the coming few months. Hopefully to get back to spotting pretty soon. But I'll be, like I said, I'll also be trying out a few new things for this year as well. So keep an eye out for that. And you know, I will admit, to my first voiceover video, I do admit it's not perfect and it's not great. But you know, you have to start somewhere. So hopefully, as I get a bit more and more used to doing voiceovers, I should be able to improve that over time. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and see you on the next video. Bye, guys.